got it twisted, we don't care about feelings, this shit about business.
All I see is commas, 20, 50, 100, racing to the money.
Yo, what up, it's us Dot
and Holly,
and we back again with another video. Today we got Gangs of Chicago, O-Block versus Tookaville. Link to this video in the description box
down below.
Gang shit in LA shit, you feel me? Don't forget to follow us on social media.
Holly access that.
Let's get into it.
In my previous video about the gangs of Chicago, we looked at how the Black Disciples and Gangster Disciples evolved over the decades since they were started in the late 60s, all the way up to the mid-2000s, where we saw the leadership of each gang begin to crumble. We of course took a brief look at the 2004 crackdown on the Black Disciples that saw their then leader, Marvel Thompson, indicted and taken off the street along with 41 other senior BDs. And we of course looked at how the city of Chicago ended up demolishing several of the large tenement buildings that were actually drug-dealing strongholds for both the Black Disciples and Gangster Disciples over this period. The demolition of many of these gang-controlled blocks in Chicago left many younger members of both the GDs and BDs displaced, being forced to find new hoods and make new alliances to continue getting money in the street together. So today, we're going to take a closer look at two of the most well-known BD and GD sets that emerged after the demolition of those Chicago projects. In fact, we're going to be taking a look at possibly the most well-known BD set in history.
I low-key like the way he talking.
Yeah.
I like the way he kind of breaking it down. It's like, it's not biased. It's just like information. It's like he giving the information.
Block. But the O wasn't always O-Block. Long before King Von and Chief Keef immortalized O-Block forever in their lyrics, the BD-controlled Parkway Gardens blocks in Chicago used to go by the name Wick City, with Wick, W-I-C, standing for wild, insane, and crazy. But in this case, the Wick is stylized with 3 eyes, mainly due to the BD's affinity with the number 3. In fact, the story goes that many of the young Black Disciples based at Parkway Gardens were actually the descendants of BDs who had worked under Marvel Thompson in the castle before the big busting.
Hey, he got a lot of info.
It sound about right, low-key a little bit, because even him saying Wick City, you know?
Right.
It's like,
got a lot of inside info, low-key.
You think?
2004. And if you didn't know,
like,
the castle was actually a large drug-dealing operation ran by the BDs in Chicago, back when the gang was much larger and had a much clearer and organized leadership. But by the time we get to the 2010s, the BDs in Wick City were much less organized, and essentially just an emerging BD set made up of displaced youngers with ties to that original operation. But as I've said on numerous videos on gang culture before, a lot of the reasons that gang emerge is for protection against other groups, so where there's a gang, there are usually ops. And in this case, Wick City's main opposition are a couple of Gangster Disciple sets located in adjacent blocks. One of these Gangster Disciple sets that is known to beef with Wick City are the St. Lawrence Boys, or STL, a crew that are based on 63rd and St. Lawrence Street. In fact, the location of this group is the exact reason why the likes of King Von are constantly dissing people from 63rd. And the STL GDs are also clicked up with another GD crew adjacent to them, known as EBT, who are located on 64th and South Eberhart Avenue.
Folks, shooting niggas in new assholes, let niggas be known STL EBT right here, man. Shout out to the gang, man. Hey, you already know, man. Killer, man. Hey, what block I'm on, man? EBT, man. Right here, man.
STL and EBT are right next to each other and are often referred to collectively as STL EBT, and that territory in turn is right next to Parkway Gardens or Wick City. For the purpose of this video, until a major event happens that causes an area to change its name, I'll continue referring to it as its name at the time. So as we begin this story, there are 2 main sides, the Wick City BDs and the STL EBT GDs. And if you think that's a lot of letters to remember, just think how many gang signs these guys have to learn. Now, it's hard to find one cataclysmic event that has caused the enormous wave of beef between these two groups. What seems to be the reality is that some of this beef dates all the way back to high school days, where members from these opposing areas would get into pretty basic schoolyard fights. However, these small, local schoolyard beefs would unfortunately escalate into deadly violence when those involved became old enough to get guns, likely facilitated by older BDs and GDs from their respective areas, pushing age-old feuds that probably date all the way back to the Marvel Thompson days of the BDs, or perhaps even earlier. But the thing is, one mustn't forget that in a lot of these stories, the people involved are basically children, teenagers. with many of them tragically having their lives taken before they're even old enough to buy a beer. And it's this fact that really makes the events that unfolded over just a few years even more tragic. And before we get into it, I just want to say, I know there's a lot of overlap between different gang sets in Chicago, so I just want to make it clear that for the purpose of this video, we're only focusing on a specific set of events that are significant to the early formation of Wick City, later becoming O Block. Who knows, in future videos I might branch out to other beefs involving other local gang sets that relate to O Block, like 600 or Lamron. But for the purpose of today's video, we're going to remain hyper-focused on Wick City and STL EBT, which will later become O Block and Tookaville. And I know there's a lot of online scoreboards out there that claim to kind of keep track of many of the unverified supposed tit-for-tat shootings between these groups, and many sites like Chiracology on Reddit, or one of the
Wait, that was interesting too. Chiracology. But I wanted to say, I guess I wanted to ask, do that make y'all interested to go back to see like how the shit was like back in the day, like before we was born and shit? Like I want to know, you know?
Like with the big BDs.
Yeah, like was they in the back in the day, like you jive turkey? You
damn.
On BD, you feel?
I think it was more organized. I think they probably wasn't even doing all that shit.
Okay.
But they could have been though, like, you know, smacking niggas and shit.
Right, you know, I don't know, I'm just saying, like, lingo and shit is like, you know how it'd be like even hard to take our parents serious with certain shit, so I want to go see.
Shit. I think they were shooting niggas in the foot and shit.
Billboards out there that claim to kind of keep track of many of the unverified supposed tit-for-tat shootings between these groups, and many sites like Chiracology on Reddit, or one of the many excellent YouTube channels that covers Chicago drill news, have covered and distributed a lot of unverified info about supposed crimes that may or may not have happened as part of this beef. I'm not just going to regurgitate that info to you. Instead, we're just going to focus on the facts of the pivotal moments that made this beef escalate, taking you through the journey of how these young BD and GD sets escalated a feud to all-out gang war, and ultimately how, as a result, their block became the most deadly in America.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It's interesting. It's like, I don't even really got nothing to say. It's like, I wish everybody documentary was like this. So you could really, like, you know.
Now, Parkway Gardens, where the Wick City BDs are located, was eventually named Chicago and America's most dangerous block. And this is mainly the result of a staggering amount of shootings that took place there between 2011 and 2014. And this is actually the exact window of time that we are going to take a look at in this video. And I'd say that it's pretty clear that Parkway Gardens' reputation for being dangerous is the direct result of the events that unfolded as part of this feud. And in no small part, a result of the involvement of some of the very dangerous individuals that inhabited these blocks during this period of time. Some of the names from the Wick City BD enforcers of the 2010s may be very familiar to you, especially if you've listened to popular Chicago drill music in recent years. Of course, the most famous names of all at this point are Chief Keef and King Von. Chief Keef is famously from Parkway Gardens and reps O Block to the fullest, as well as fellow BD-affiliated set 300, which Chief Keef has shouted out endlessly. However, when it comes to gang violence, as far as we know, Chief Keef has no bodies. He might have a reputation on the streets and in his music for letting guns blast, but he doesn't claim to be a killer. Chief Keef always portrayed himself as more of a tough guy trapper, and ultimately the fact that he was able to focus more on the music than on the streets as his career developed might be the reason that he's still alive with us today. The same, of course, can't be said for King Von, a Parkway Gardens veteran who supposedly caught numerous bodies and didn't care who knew it. Of course, only recently half taken over the rap game, releasing what often felt more like confessions than actual songs. But all the way back in the early 2010s, King Von had been repping his BD affiliation on social media to the fullest, holding down the blocks of Parkway and showing love to his gang for the entire world to see.
Yeah, bitch. Yeah.
Other big names in the Wick City BD set include feared supposed shooters like HK and J Money or J Munna. Then of course there's King Von's beloved BD bro T Roy, who is apparently a bit of a dynamic duo along with Von, with a close bond between these two becoming very relevant later in the story. And in fact, this is the exact reason why even right up until his death in 2020, King Von used to go by the name V-Roy on Twitter. And the fact that he comes from Wick City is why his Twitter handle still is at King Von from the Wick. Basically, King Von and T-Roy...
So that was T-Roy in his picture. I thought that was him in his picture, in the picture for his Twitter.
Oh, that's not him?
That's not him. I think that's T-Roy. That's crazy. They look down there alike.
Yeah, that kind of... I thought that was Von in that picture.
Yeah, I always thought that was him.
is why his Twitter handle still is @KingVon from the Wick. Basically, King Von and T-Roy loved their gang and they loved their block, holding it down with other Wick City members like Big A, OD, Trey 5, Platoon, Boss Money, Sharoid, Duke, who's actually been mentioned in numerous King Von lyrics, Rah Rah, aka Breezy, and Boss Top, who also became a rapper like Keith, even actually going on to drop a song called Wick City, and even later falling out with Chief Keef after apparently stealing clothes from him, leading DJ Academics in the War of Chirac era to affectionately dub him the Diaper Bandit. And look, I know by no means is this a complete
Wait, let me
War of
see
Chirac era.
Spike stealing his baby's diapers.
Damn, that's crazy.
To affectionately dub him the Diaper Bandit. And look, I know by no means is this a completely extensive list of every member who has ever been affiliated with Wick City or O-Block, and especially as of recently, names like Muwop and Gleesh have become more relevant. For the purpose of today's story, this isn't an O-Block member lineup. It's just an initial introduction to the main events of the beef up until around 2014. But don't get it twisted, if we go into a future video covering further into this beef, I will of course introduce new names. But the names aren't really what's important, it's the sentiment. These were the Wick City BDs holding down their block and doing the most to fight their ops. The Wick City BDs were very well known for throwing up GDK hand signs repeatedly to show the world that they were GD killers who were very much indeed down to ride and kill.
GDK shit, man. You feel me? Everybody got the voice in their hand, man. You feel me? GDK. Broke boys.
So, who were the GD boys that these guys wanted to K so badly? Well, over on the STL EBT side, they were up against a few names who you might know if you're well versed in Chicago drill culture. The first to come to mind is Jakira Barnes, also known as Key or KI, a young female hitter who was good friends with fellow member Tuka growing up. Another member was FBG Butter, who along with KI were also known as a bit of a dynamic duo dubbed the Twins. Other members actually went by FBG or Flyboy Gang, an STL EB clique more focused on making music, which included other names like FBG Brick, and of course the legendary FBG Duck. Another musically inclined member who repped FBG was Lil J, who lived in STL and would later become more clicked up with them, but mainly had beef with 600 that kind of ran adjacent to this feud. They had Lil B and Wooski, who had actually been dubbed King of the Ops. There was Boss Trell and Lil Doc. Once again, there might be some names from STL EBT, especially the later years, who haven't been included here, but these are the prominent members of both sides who played a prominent role during this period. So now you know the background and the people involved, let's take a closer look at the actual storyline so we can get a better understanding of how events unfolded, causing Wick City to become O-Block and STL EBT to become
Tookaville.
Damn. Yeah, it's like we gotta go back because I gotta see at like which point. I even thought it was interesting that how he showed like all of the buildings being like the time lapse.
Yeah.
And how they tore the shit down. Yeah. It was like they even tore a little bit of it down there first. It's like, damn. So that migrating shit did, like, you know, I wonder if there's GDs and BDs anywhere else.
As I mentioned at the start of this video, the true origins of this beef are pretty hard to trace. It would seem pretty unrealistic to try and trace things back to their exact origins in the schoolyard scraps between the BD and GD members from each of these blocks. But we certainly can trace the true bloodshed between these groups back to one pivotal moment, and that's the killing of Edric Tyshawn Walker, also known as Ty, a BD who was gunned down in May 2009 being just 17 years old. Ty was shot multiple times just before 10 PM on the 6500 block of South Evans Avenue, with 3 suspects from EBT being charged with his murder. Now, Ty was actually closer aligned with another BD set called the 065 Young Money, but following his death, local friends of his formed the group TYMB, or Ty You're My Brother. This was to both keep his memory alive and also a pledge to avenge him, a move that would become a little bit of a trend as this beef continues. Anywho, the loss of Ty was only the beginning of bloodshed in the area, mainly caused by STL EBT members. And it would actually be the next killing after Ty that would be a direct escalation of war between STL EBT and Wick City. In this case, the person in question was Reezy, or Rah Rah, an older OG member of Wick City who was gunned down in August 2010. Reezy, aka Rah Rah, real name Laverick Marshall, was an older OG member of Wick City, and on August the 25th, 2010, Reezy was found shot in the back after the police broke up an enormous fight near 64th Street and South King Drive. Reezy was later pronounced dead at the hospital. Now, there's been a lot of speculation over who committed this crime, but nothing conclusive has ever been proven. But regardless, only a month later, another brutal slaying went down that appeared to be related, this time with an STL EBT member's relative being taken out on their turf. Apparently in this case, a blood relative of STL member FBG Kells, the retaliatory victim was Jeremy Marshall, also known on the street as Lil 4. Not to be confused with a different Lil 4 who died in 2013. Jeremy was approached near 63rd and Rhodes Avenue by two people, with one pulling out a gun and beginning to shoot. He was shot in the back and tried to run before collapsing, but unfortunately didn't make it, and the shooters fled the scene in a vehicle. Once again, it was unclear exactly who committed this crime, but intense speculation has suggested that it was somebody from the Wick City BDs, with many going as far to draw a link between the fact that O.D. Perry from Wick City was gaining a reputation for being a shooter around this time. Now, this can't strictly be proven, but it's likely that there were retaliations between Wick City and STL EBT in the months that followed. And this would lead us to January 2011, where we're introduced to an all too familiar name in Chicago drill, Tuka. On the 12th of January 2011, 15-year-old Shondale Gregory, known on the streets as Tuka, was waiting at a bus stop at the 600 block on East 63rd Street.
How's everybody getting killed in this same spot?
Waiting on the bus.
At a certain point, a dark-coloured vehicle pops up and somebody hops out wearing a half mask. Some have said that this person exchanged a few words with Tuka, but ultimately within seconds, they had shot Tuka multiple times and fled the scene. STL member FBG Duck.
How was they able to say that somebody exchanged words with Tuka? Only Tuka would know that. Was he pronounced dead on the scene, or
unless there was other people on witnesses?
Oh, okay.
Within seconds, they had shot Tuka multiple times and fled the scene. STL member FBG Duck was actually close friends with Tuka, saying that after hearing about his death, he actually ran to the scene of the crime, where in a tragic moment, he even got to see his slain brother before he was taken away.
Me and him clicked, like that was one of my real close friends, like every day, like spend the night at his house, he spend the night at mine. And my cousin came in there running to me crying and shit, telling me, hey, Crane just got killed. You feel me? Then I ran all the way from 62nd and Wabash all the way to 63rd to St. Lawrence. Saved them right there on the floor. You know how that shit go, broke right down.
Tuka had unfortunately passed away on the scene before paramedics had arrived, and it's not entirely clear who was responsible for the death of Tuka. As previously discussed, TYMB members were hell-bent on avenging their friend Ty by taking out an STL EBT member. Meanwhile, Wick City members wanted revenge for what had happened to Greasy. But regardless, ultimately Tuka paid his price for his STL EBT affiliation. In response to this tragic loss, STL EBT would rename their hood Tookaville.
That's crazy. No, I was just gonna say like they
took it out.
Yeah. Like faded him out.
In his honour and as a commitment for revenge. And members like FBG Brick would rep Tuka's memory to the fullest.
Do you represent Tookaville? Oh, to the fullest. That's what I do it for. That's what it's always been about since day one. Just Tuka. Like my homie was 15 years old, he got killed. Never hurt nobody, never did nothing, you know what I'm saying?
Meanwhile, it's actually been said that it was in response to this that members from TYMB and Wick City clicked up to form an alliance in anticipation of some kind of retaliation. And in the face of an intense desire from Tookaville to avenge their fallen brother, soon emerged an intense desire to disrespect Tuka from the BD side. As you may well know, Tuka's name has been endlessly dragged in hip-hop over the years. Now, I'm not going to get into every instance or drama over this happening, but story goes initially the GDs from Tookaville, people like FBG Duck, were apparently saying that they were smoking Tuka out of respect for him, a nod to the old story that Tupac's crew, the Outlaws, smoked his ashes in a blunt after he died. But the BD ops from Wick City immediately decided to flip this and start making fun of Tookaville. The most immediate and iconic diss, of course, was Chief Keef's song 300, where he says fuck Tuka gang. And from here, other members continued to disrespect.
I feel like that's the thing that everybody was leaving out.
What?
That they first
that Tookaville was using it first.
That they was using it as a praise or to honor them.
Right.
You were saying it.
Yeah,
but the
I
other people was
yeah.
leaving. That's what I said. I was like, the other people, like documentaries and stuff, was leaving it out. They never said that, I feel like.
So it was like just a myth or some shit, but yeah.
I feel like, and it's just my opinion, I don't really know, but to hear like Brick say, and the way that Duck talked about him, he was like he never did nothing to nobody. So maybe he was just somebody that they knew that they really loved. It's like, why would he say he ain't never did nothing to nobody?
Maybe it was a misunderstanding or something.
Right. It just feel like
it was somebody else that they was trying to get at, but then they couldn't get to him. But they seen him.
Cause why would you even hop out and talk, say anything to him? You know?
Right.
It was like they was trying to trick him or something.
It was probably like on some you from 63rd type shit.
Right.
Like STL.
So it kind of makes me feel like maybe he wasn't on shit. He just got caught in the middle of it, you know?
Yeah.
Chief Keef's song 300, where he says fuck Tuka gang. And from here, other members continued the disrespect.
Tuka, why I'm smoking on? Shut down! Oh my bitch, do I see your brain? Why the for your block? Yo!
Bitches got it twisted, we don't care about feelings. This shit about business.
All I see is commas, 20, 50, 100, racing to the money.